Hello, my name's Puddles, and we have an encounter building video. We are on part 28. We've been talking about pacing for the last couple of videos. We've talked about planning our encounters and making sure there's not too much going on. We've talked about knowing our encounters and the abilities that our creatures have, knowing what our options are so we know what to do when it is time to run our encounter. And now we're going to talk about running our encounter. So, I suppose I'll just jump right in and we can talk about some stuff. I don't really have an example here, so I just thought I would make a different kind of screen here. But, running your encounter. There are a lot of different things that you can do to adjust the flow of your fight, make it quicker, trying to make it more exciting, not dragging things out as long so that it is more enjoyable for your players. But the players are also a part of said encounter, and if they are the ones who are dragging it out, taking forever to decide on what they want to do, then you need to police them. I mean, if it takes 2 or 3 minutes to go through a full round of combat, that should be enough time for a player to decide what they want to do on their turn. And if they're taking another minute or so to do that, then you need to tell them that. I mean, it all depends on your table and how strict you want to be on these things and how bored your players, I suppose, are getting. But if your players are taking way too long to figure out their actions, then you can warn them. Say, if you don't figure something out soon, I'm just going to assume that you are taking the dodge action. I've heard a lot of other DMs do that sometimes just to show the players that we're sort of trying to work together in a timely fashion. And when one person is dragging it out, they're taking the game time away from everyone else when they should be thinking about what they're going to do on their turn. So that's a simple thing. Sometimes it can be complicated because, you know, players are humans and everyone has feelings, and you know, just figure out in your game how you would go about doing that. But it's definitely something that you should do because it can take a lot of game time. And, you know, game time can be valuable. No, game time is valuable. So we don't want to waste too much of it. Next, this is the thing that I really like, is get your players to tell you when they've finished their turn. So a lot of the time, players will like do their action and then move, and they won't have a bonus action, but they'll just sit there. And then you as a DM have to be like, okay, is that your turn? And they're like, oh yeah, I'm done. Just get it through the players' heads that when they have finished what they are doing, that they should tell you so that you can go to the next stage of combat. It's a simple thing, but I think a lot of DMs kind of miss it out, or players just don't think to do that. I know as a DM, I am always asking my players if their turn is finished. And it's something that I'm going to start expecting of my players, is for them to tell me when they're finished. Because it can, if you're waiting for 10 seconds in silence while someone's just thinking, and like if that happens every single turn, it really adds up and it's kind of frustrating for a DM. So in session 0, just say, while we're in combat, guys, after you have done your actions, after you've done everything that you want to do, just tell me that your turn is over, and then I'll go to the next person. That's as simple as it has to be, and I think it will help the pacing a lot. Another thing is having the initiative order very clear. Let players know when their turn is coming up. I mean, a lot of people like to have mystery as to when the creatures are going, but after one round of combat, they're going to know anyway. If you have a whiteboard, just write all of the initiatives on a whiteboard. Things like Roll20, they have the initiative trackers, which really help. I mean, if you want to hide the creature actions, you can totally do that, and the players can sort of gauge where they're going from where the other players are going if you want to separate it. But to me, that just seems like overcomplicating things. I don't care if my players know when creatures are going. But I do care that they know when they are going, because it will speed up their actions and them deciding, or like giving them a time limit on when they have to decide their actions. I've talked about describing actions, and I think that is very important in combat to make it more interesting. Instead of just saying, okay, the ogre hits you, you say the ogre brings his giant mace down and smashes you in the face. That's all you need. You don't need to spend 30 seconds on a monologue for every single action, because it will slow combat down. And if your players are doing that as well, I would maybe try to get them to rein it in. Not every single action needs a giant, amazing description about it. I also like to tie actions together. So if a goblin like misses a player, I'll just say, okay, the goblin misses you. And then on his turn, if he attacks and hits the goblin, I'll combine those two descriptions to save time. So I'll be like, so as the goblin is going to strike at you, you dodge out the way and cleave off his head. So it's like combining the action descriptions so that you're using less time to do it, but you're still getting the whole picture. That's something that I like to do when I can. It's obviously, you have to sort of do it on the fly. You need to, what's the word? I think it starts with an I. Improvise. You need to improvise with those kinds of things. In terms of letting your players describe actions, let them describe the important actions. If they're casting like a huge spell, let them describe it. If they're killing the big bad guy, let them describe it. If they just killed like 20 creatures with one fireball, let them describe it. But you as the DM are controlling the flow of the combat, so you should probably be the one describing combat. And every table is different. If you don't want to do that and you want to let your players do it, do it. Like, and if it takes longer and you're okay with that, that's perfectly okay. But just remember that you can speed things up, and in my opinion and in my experience, speeding up combat is always a good thing. I like to use combat music. I think while people are like thinking about things or like sitting around, if there's like some upbeat combat music, it sort of pumps everybody up, and it just naturally makes you want to do things a little bit quicker. It makes it more interesting. Music is heavily tied to emotion, so it's good for making things tense and building that tension in fights. And I just think it makes combats better. And lastly, this one's pretty important. Focus on the combat. Everything else can come later. If your players run into a room that they haven't been into chasing a creature, like say, oh, this room is this big or this big, don't go explaining the tapestry on the wall. Don't, because after the combat, they can look at all of those things. Don't stop combat to explain things that they're seeing in the setting. Don't, unless they actually take their time to want to do things. Like if a player is in the middle of a fight and he's like, I'm going to use my action to investigate this statue, totally do that. But don't just say, oh, you're in a new room, there is this, and then spend a minute describing this statue, because it's going to completely halt combat. It's going to bring all of the tension out of it, and it's just, it can wait. Like you can wait until combat is over. And if you're talking from a realism kind of perspective, your players are in the middle of a fight for their lives. They're not going to notice all this stuff unless they take the time to do it. That's why in the monster manual, it is an action to use your perception and look around, or your investigation to investigate something. Those are reasons, is because you're in the middle of a fight with these creatures that are trying to kill you. So you don't really notice the other things in the room. But yeah, so that is my conclusion on pacing. I know there are different methods of dealing with these things, but these are the three simple ways that I just thought I would blurt out into the internet and tell you how to improve the speed of combat. I hope this has been helpful. If you have any more comments on pacing, or think I've missed anything, or disagree completely, please leave some comments in the comment section. But that's for me for now. I'll see you next time.